Something changed in April 2026. And if you haven't read the Cloud Security Alliance paper published this week, you need to stop what you're doing and read it. The title is The AI Vulnerability Storm, Building a Mythos-Ready Security Program. It was authored by Gadi, Evron, Rich Mogull, and Rob T. Lee, with contributions from Jen Easterly, Bruce Schneier, Chris Inglis, Rob Joyce, Heather Adkins, Phil Venables, and about 60 other CISOs and security leaders who reviewed it. That is not a vendor white paper. That is the field talking to itself about a moment it believes is genuinely different. Here's what's different. Anthropic's Claude Mythos preview autonomously discovered thousands of critical zero-day vulnerabilities across every major operating system and browser. It generated 181 working exploits against Firefox, where the previous model succeeded only twice. It found a 27-year-old bug in OpenBSD. It did this without human guidance, without custom setup, at a speed and scale that no security team on Earth can match. That's what the storm looks like. And this paper is your survival guide. Let's start with what Mythos actually is and why the CSA authors are treating it as a structural turning point rather than just another capability announcement. Mythos has 3 technical properties that combined make it qualitatively different from previous AI security tools. First, exploits without scaffolding. Prior AI systems needed elaborate setup, agent frameworks, carefully tuned prompting pipelines, human hand-holding through complex steps. Mythos generates working exploits with a single prompt. The paper calls this one-shot capability. You type a question, it comes back with an exploit. That's not iteration, that's instant. Second, chained vulnerabilities. Mythos doesn't just find individual bugs, it identifies vulnerabilities that require combining multiple memory corruption primitives into a single exploit path, the kind of complex chaining that previously demanded months of skilled human research. Third, scale. This wasn't finding a handful of bugs. This was thousands of 0 days across every major operating system and browser. The paper says the time between a vulnerability existing and being weaponized has now compressed from weeks to hours. To put that in concrete terms, Claude Opus 4.6, Anthropic's previous leading model, successfully generated 2 working Firefox exploits under controlled testing conditions. Mythos generated 181 under the same conditions. Same target, 181 versus 2. That is not a linear improvement, that is a step change. And this didn't come from nowhere. The paper walks through the timeline. XBio topped the HackerOne leaderboard in June 2025. Google's Big Sleep found 20 real-world 0 days in open source that same summer. DARPA's AI Cyber Challenge found 54 vulnerabilities in 4 hours of compute. Claude Opus 4.6 reported 500-plus high-severity open source vulnerabilities in February 2026. A CVSS 9.8 OpenSSL flaw dating to 1998 was found by AI. An AI-orchestrated attack reached admin-level access in 8 minutes. Mythos is the most visible milestone so far. It will not be the last. So what did Anthropic do about it? They launched Project Glasswing, what the CSA authors describe as possibly the largest multi-party vulnerability coordination effort in history. Before publicly disclosing Mythos's capabilities, Anthropic gave 40 critical infrastructure providers, industry partners, and open source maintainers early access. Now, the idea, let them see the vulnerabilities in their own products first so they could patch before anyone else could exploit. That's a reasonable approach. It's also a limited one. Here's the problem the paper is direct about. The world's exploitable attack surface is vastly larger than what 40 partners can cover. Most organizations that build or maintain critical software will not have early access to Mythos-class capabilities, and the competitive timeline is narrowing fast. If comparable offensive capabilities emerge in other frontier models within months, and in open weight models within 6 months to a year, the defensive advantage from early coordination becomes time-limited by definition. The window doesn't stay open, it closes. This brings us to what I think is the most important concept in the entire paper, the zero-day clock. In March 2026, Sergey Epp and others launched the zero-day clock, a visualization of how the time between vulnerability discovery and weaponization has collapsed. As of 2026, that time is under 1 day. Let that sit for a second. Not weeks, not days, under 1 day. Your current security program was not designed for this. Your patch cycles weren't designed for this. Your incident response playbooks weren't designed for this. Your risk metrics almost certainly assume a window that no longer exists. The paper puts it plainly, the asymmetry this creates is structural. AI lowers the cost and skill floor for discovering and exploiting vulnerabilities faster than organizations can patch them. Attackers gain disproportionate benefit. Defenders are still bound by the inherent slowness of the patch cycle. There's an important nuance here, and the paper is careful to include it. The collapse in time to exploit has not yet produced a proportional increase in the impact of exploitation. Many of the most damaging recent incidents still involved credential abuse, social engineering, or supply chain compromise, not zero-day exploitation. The zero-day clock is a leading indicator of where attacker capability is heading. It's not yet a direct measure of current damage, but leading indicators are what you act on before the damage arrives. So what do you actually do? The paper builds what it calls a Mythos-Ready Security Program, not as a theoretical framework, but as an operational plan across 3 time horizons: what you do this week, what you do over the next 45 days, and what you build over the next 12 months. The program starts by being honest about a set of assumptions that are now broken. Assume you can no longer count on a patch being ready in time for remediation. Assume incident frequency will increase. Assume the CVE system won't scale to the volume coming. And assume that as coding agents spread to developers everywhere, shadow IT will fragment central control in ways that are very hard to see coming. The priority actions table in the paper is worth spending time with. It breaks down actions by time horizon with rough estimates of risk impact and framework references across NIST, MITRE ATLAS, OWASP, and others. I won't read every row. Download the paper and use it directly, but the through line is clear. Minimum viable resilience means 4 things: limiting the ability of attackers to exploit discovered vulnerabilities, discovering more vulnerabilities yourself before adversaries do, responding quickly to incidents at scale, and accelerating your security team with AI agents. Before you can prioritize actions, you need to know where you actually stand, not where your policies say you stand, but where your operations actually are. The paper includes 10 diagnostic questions designed to give you ground truth. I want to highlight 4 of them because they're sharp. Question 1, what is our actual stance on AI today? Not our policy, our actual reality. Allowed, tolerated, restricted, or unknown. If the answer is unknown, that's your first problem. Question 2, can employees use agentic coding tools in the enterprise today? Not just chatbot access. Yeah, so actual coding agents with looping tool use and automation. Do you have security guardrails in place for those agents because your developers are using them whether or not you have guardrails? Question 7, what is the fastest this company has made a security-driven production change in the last year? Use a real example, not a policy statement. This one reveals the truth about whether your security function can actually affect outcomes or just advise. Question 10, does executive leadership have a working definition of urgency? The paper's note here is blunt. If everything is a crisis, nothing is urgent. That's a leadership problem, not a tools problem. These questions matter because the paper makes something uncomfortable explicit. The CISO's ability to manage risk has been reduced to a degree that could potentially affect business reporting and projections. Risk metrics that were calibrated for a world where time to exploit was measured in weeks are now wrong. And wrong risk metrics are a board problem, not just a security program problem. The paper spends real time on something most security strategy documents skip entirely: the human cost. Security teams right now are being squeezed from 3 directions simultaneously. AI is accelerating the volume of vulnerabilities they must respond to. AI is accelerating the volume of code their organizations are shipping, and AI is expanding the attack surface. At the same time, they're being asked to integrate AI into their own workflows without corresponding investment in headcount, tooling, or well-being. The paper calls this out directly as an operational risk. Burnout and attrition in security functions aren't just HR problems. The expertise needed to navigate this transition is scarce, takes years to develop, and is not replaceable on short timescales. Security team resilience, sustainable workload, mental health support, retention is a strategic priority with the same urgency as the technical challenges. The flip side of this is that agents represent a genuine opportunity for relief. The paper makes the case that every security role is becoming an AI builder role, and that the barrier to getting started is lower than most people realize. Using a coding agent, they write, is now easier than using Excel. All you need to know is English. That's not hype. That's a practical instruction. Start today. On the defensive AI side, the paper is careful to be honest about the current state. Most AI defensive controls are not yet mature, but that doesn't mean defenders are standing still. The key insight is this: LLM-based vulnerability discovery capabilities, the same kind of technology Mythos uses offensively, are already mature and can be turned toward defense. You can start today by giving a coding agent a security review task on any piece of your code. That's not a future roadmap item, that's this week. Beyond that, agents accelerate human action across the board, from incident response to GRC. triaging and testing patches, red teaming your own environment, automating audit data collection, accelerating security operations. The paper's prescription is simple. Demand that your team use these agents. Don't make it optional. It's now table stakes. The paper includes a full executive and board briefing section at Mythos, and it's one of the more practical things I've seen written on this topic. The framing they recommend has two parts. First, justify the current program. AI is making the business faster and more competitive. The same capabilities in adversary hands compress the window to a serious incident from weeks to hours. The funded security program your organization already has is what makes your AI strategy viable. It's not a cost center. It's why you don't get stopped cold by the first wave. Second, make the case for what comes next. The 90-day plan the paper recommends has 6 components: increase people and capacity, deploy AI tooling across all security functions, harden infrastructure, accelerate procurement, governance, update playbooks, and track progress with regular check-ins. And there's a historical parallel the paper makes that I think is genuinely useful for board conversations. Y2K was a systemic threat with a hard deadline. The industry met it through coordinated, disciplined effort. Not everyone was prepared. The ones who were fine. The ones who waited paid for it. This is the same kind of problem, with more powerful tools available to defenders than Y2K ever offered, if you use them. Let me close with what I think the paper is actually saying underneath all the frameworks and tables. The window between when a vulnerability exists and when it's being actively exploited has collapsed to less than a day. AI systems are now discovering vulnerabilities at a volume and speed that outpaces anything current security programs were built to absorb. The asymmetry favors attackers structurally, not just tactically. The response isn't panic, it's acceleration. The paper's title calls this a storm. That's accurate, but it's also a storm that has been building visibly for over a year. Expo, Google Big Sleep, the DARPA AI Cyber Challenge, the Linux kernel reports, the OpenSSL findings. Mythos is not the first wave, it's the most visible one so far. The organizations that come through this are the ones that start now. They answer the 10 diagnostic questions honestly. They get one coding agent deployed on one security task this week. They update their risk metrics before the board asks why they didn't. They treat AI as a core part of how security gets done, not as a future capability to evaluate later. You can download the full paper at labs.cloudsecurityalliance.org/mythos-CISO. It's free under Creative Commons. Read it, use the risk register, use the priority actions table, give the 10 questions to your team before your next staff meeting. I'm Evron for Gula Tech Adventures. Links in the description. See you next time.